In the last video, we made an 80s style string pad using the Tyrell N6. In this video, we're going to add a few audio plugins to both polish the sound design and also make room in the mix for other tracks we're going to make. The EQ we're using in this tutorial is an emulation of analog equipment, so it won't have a visualizer to show you the frequency activity of the sound, nor will it graphically show you the curves of the EQ. You have to use your ears to hear these things. So for this video, I'm going to use a visual aid to show you the frequency activity. Now I'll add the EQ we're actually going to use in this tutorial. It's made by Tokyo Dawn Labs. It's named TDR-VOS Slick EQ. I'm going to click on the EQ saturation button. This will bring some harmonics out of my synth. Then I'm going to set the calibration. And this is going to allow me to adjust the drive of my output stage using decibels, which gives me even more control over the amount of upper harmonic content that I hear. I want to then set my output stage to deep, and this deep setting is an odd ordered distortion. If you didn't understand any of what I just said, know that what we're dealing with here are basically techniques to slightly distort our sound, bring out harmonics of the sound, and also give the synthesizer an overall quote unquote deeper feeling. Now I'll adjust the frequency of my MIDI knob to 8,500 hertz and pull the gain way up to 18. And let's compare what it sounds like with the TDR EQ on and with the TDR EQ off. Next comes the high shelf. Now, let's explain a little bit what a shelf is. If I set a high frequency, like at 8,000, for instance, and I raise the gain, what I'm saying is everything from 8,000 hertz and above, I want to raise the amplitude level of, right? If I were to lower the amplitude level, I'm saying everything from 8,000 hertz and above, I want to lower. Okay. Likewise, a low shelf works in a similar way. If I were to set a low shelf, say at 200 hertz and raise all of it, well, then I'm saying everything that's 200 hertz and below, I want to raise the amplitude of. If I were to set my low shelf at 200 hertz and pull it down, that would mean everything at 200 hertz, I want to lower. Everything from 200 hertz and lower, I want to make quieter, basically. So that's how a shelf works. So, with this understanding of how a shelf works, we now come to how we're going to use it on this particular synth. Now, it might seem a little bit odd, but I'm actually going to set the frequency of my high knob to 8,000 hertz, which sits just below the mid curve frequency setting that I just set to 8,500 hertz. Remember though that the reason I'm doing this is because the shape of my high knob here, it's not a band, it's a shelf. Again, that means everything above 8,000 hertz um, is going to be raised in terms of amplitude level. Okay. So after I set this to 8,000 hertz, I'm going to increase all of the frequencies by 5 decibels. Let's go ahead and just hear the impact of what this would do. So I did make a little mistake in recording this video. What you're going to see here is that I'm going to adjust the low shelf knob, but that's really not the knob that I meant to change. So when I adjust it, you'll notice that I didn't touch the gain at all. I just left the gain where it is. In other words, you don't need to adjust the low shelf frequency. And if you do and you don't touch the gain, it's not going to do anything, right? So just an important point. On to the next step. So what you do need to adjust here is the high pass frequency knob on the far left, okay? And you're going to want to change that to 179 hertz, right? So you click and drag up to do this. What this is doing is it's cutting out all of the lowest frequencies, which I won't need since my song will use this pad only in the higher register, right? So, in other words, when you EQ, you always want to think about where are you playing the notes. I'm specifically creating an EQ and really designing a synth pad, which we did last video, for a higher register part. So you should always be thinking when you're using EQ, well, what register is this instrument playing in? So now let's look at a visual representation of the EQ curve we've created. You might ask, why wouldn't we just do this with the stock EQ plugin in Ableton? Well, the reason is because the TDR EQ doesn't sound quite the same, right? Since it gives us control over the saturation and the output stage. Now that we've covered all of that, let's take a listen to how our TDR EQ impacted the sound. Sounds pretty good. Let's save the preset. Click where it says default and go to Save as New Global User Preset. Pick a good naming convention for the preset and then click Create. The last plugin I want to add is a reverb plugin named Tall Reverb. Let's take a listen to the default settings. Okay, so I don't want any modulation created by this reverb plugin because what it's doing is it's impacting the clarity of my pulse width modulation that's created by the Tyrell N6. In other words, it's just too muddy, it's not clear enough. I want more clarity. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull down the rate and the amount, and let's take a listen to what it sounds like when I do that. Not bad, but I want to hear the reverb effect just a little bit more, so I'll turn up my wet dial and turn down the dry dial. Remember, dry signal is the sound without the plugin's effects being applied, and wet signal is the sound of the plugin being applied. A lot of times you want a balance of both dry and wet signal. So let's make an adjustment and listen again. Okay, awesome. Don't forget to hit the save button and then you're all set. On to the next video.